Welcome back. What's good, homies? Welcome to the Drafts and Drafts podcast. I'm Joe, aka Sultan. This is Dave. Where are you? That way, aka Disaster. It's Wednesday, April 17th, and today we're reviewing the final three teams in our roster review series, this time featuring the Juggernauts. But before we get started, happy Masters Week, Dave. Masters Week being over, I guess. I got my all green outfit on to rep the green jacket. Did you get to watch Scotty play at all? Did you see him take it home?
I watched a little, mostly on Saturday and Sunday, and I thought he played great. I think that it's kind of one of those moments where I thought Bruce Koepka could have been this guy, and now Scotty's kind of coming up and proving that he could just be this dominant number one. And really interesting character too. Just like if you watch,
you think so?
Netflix special, yeah, I do. Like he's just kind of a quirky dude. He kind of reminds me of Kirk Cousins in a lot of ways. He's just kind of this quirky dude, but he accelerates and excels at his game. But he's super family oriented. Obviously, like his wife wasn't there because she was about to have their child, and so yeah, it's kind of a crazy story about how good he's become. But he grinds, and I respect that. So kudos to Scotty.
Yeah, I got to disagree. I thought it was so anticlimactic. I saw something of that, the ratings in the Masters this year were the worst in the last 5 years or second worst in the last decade. And it just was like, I agree. After day two, I was like, I really don't. It just goes to show how much Tiger drives the eyes on golf. But
I mean, listen, I was definitely rooting for Tiger, and I was disappointed to see how he performed on Saturday.
One of us.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've shot lower than 82 before, not only once, but I did it. And so,
humble brag.
Humble brag. But yeah, it kind of all comes down to that thing of what do you want? And so, do you want it to be a shootout and it has to go to essentially overtime to be a good game because Tom Brady's not in it, or if we're talking a football analogy, or can you respect that it's two great new up and coming players? If you had two young quarterbacks that were coming in, I think that's kind of the interesting narrative. And sure, Tiger is right now, no one's going to catch or touch Tiger because no one's even been close to it from a performance standpoint. And Tiger wasn't Tiger until he was Tiger. And it's kind of that same thing here. That next person, Rory, Brooks, Scotty, whomever, they have to do that thing. They have to be magnificent for such a long period of time. I thought the other really interesting narrative that kind of came out of it was that I didn't know. If you saw the Bryson DeChambeau, he 3D designed his own irons that got approved that week of the Masters, and it was his first time playing with them at the tournament. He started off really hot, so everyone was kind of buzzing about that. Saw a lot of other people kind of talking about it, dove in a little bit deeper on my own. And again, it's the internet, so it could be wrong, but I've read from a few sources. This was the truth. But it turns out that time, Tiger did the exact same thing in the year that he won the Tiger Open, where he won all four, and he just dominated that year, winning all the tournaments. Was a year when he had his own custom equipment.
I didn't realize that.
And he was the only one tour that had it. And so it's something I didn't realize either. And so it's just kind of this very interesting narrative that it brings up more questions than answers. But either way, I think whoever can do that next, whatever the next evolution is in golf, I'm really excited for it. And I hope that we get someone in that nature. But I'm a big tennis guy, as you know. I think it's the same thing in tennis. And we're going really off topic now. But
yeah, you're going too long into this. I agree. Yeah. I think you did prompt me to think of a good OTQ for a future episode, which will be somehow related to, do you like winning going into Monday night or having a player left to play but losing? And anyways, I just thought it's a good question for another time. But before we get started, let's get to yet another draft review. Dave, you want to kick us off? I saw you had what looked like a delicious beer, frothy brew.
This thing is trash. It's something my wife likes. It is a Smirnoff Ice, red, white, and berry. There are two versions of this. So her favorite version is the one that is a malt beverage. So make sure you look for the malt. Methods in class if you're not watching. So we'll give it a little crack.
And for those of you who are listening, this thing looks like what could be the Night King's urine. It's frothy ice blue. It's the funniest looking drink I've ever seen.
This is yeah. I mean, to me, this is like the jugs from when you're in elementary school. This is adult jugs, and
Absolutely.
it looks ridiculous. So yeah.
All right. Well, before you drink, I'll give you guys a quick review. I have here yet another Treehouse beer. If you didn't know, I guess apparently you buy these in bulk when you go. So quick $200 down the drain on about 8 beers. I have the Treehouse Juice Machine. Yet again, fantastic can art. It's this looks like graffiti paint sprayed wall with a clip art style astronaut on the front with a bunch of fruits in his mask. So I'm looking for. I've never actually had this one, so I'm looking forward to trying it. I'm gonna give it a quick live crack. Cheers, Dave.
You're getting better. Cheers.
Okay, Dave, what do you think? You first.
Oh, it's a jugs. I've had them before. It's a one. I mean, I don't know. Like,
are there any earthy notes or crunchy tones that we should know about?
No, it tastes like a melted gusher. I don't know. Like, it's just a blue melted gusher, berry melted gusher. I don't even know how to describe it. It's just yeah, it's sugar water. And
Perfect.
Listen, if you want to drink sugar water with alcohol, if for the women out there that are listening to this podcast, I know there's a lot of you. This is your drink, the red, white, and berry malt beverage. My wife loves it. It's her summer little refresher at the end of the week.
It's type 2 diabetes in a glass. I love it.
Yeah, with a little bit of alcohol, with the buzz.
So the juice machine, it's not quite as juicy as I would have expected based on the name and the pictures. I thought I was expecting a bit more hints of like pineapple or some sort of fruitiness. But as far as IPAs go, I mean, it's fantastic. Smooth. I think I'd give it a 4 out of 5. I think it's behind the other two that it's ahead of the New Zealand one I had last week, and it's still behind the Waffle Banger. That's like just my go-to.
That is one the juice machine is one of my favorite beers from Treehouse.
So. Yeah. Okay. Good to know.
Better poured than out of a can, but
pouring it right now.
There you go.
Speaking of drafts, NFL draft is next week. I think maybe we can launch into a little bit more detail on that next week, a little preview. I think maybe it'd be fun to go through maybe an NFL draft and a rookie mock after. But one quick off the cuff question: who do you want the Patriots to take at 103? We've talked about this ad nauseum in our personal group chats long before all the news coming out about favorites and betting lines. Just a quick 30-second spiel. What do you want the Patriots to do at 103? What do you think that means for the team?
Dude, I don't even fucking know. Honestly, I think so. I think it depends on what's there. If assuming Marvin Harrison's there, I'd grab Marvin Harrison because I think that to rely on the third best quarterback in this draft, like you can always go get that player if our team sucks. I'd almost rather ensure that we actually have weapons and we have nothing right. Like there's nothing on the Patriots to support a QB that's young, nothing. And so why would we go get that person when there's nothing else around him? Unless you're going to try to double up, which I think that's the other thing too. If it's a QB in round 1 and a wide receiver in round 2, or a wide receiver in round 1 and a QB in round 2, fine. Like I'm okay with that. Like play that tandem. So I just want something of that nature. And to me, I'd get the best available skill position player. And if they really think that that's one of the quarterbacks, fine. It hasn't been their specialty, but it is a new head coach. So I would say go with Harrison if available.
Cool. Yeah, I think you're echoing what a lot of people feel like. I personally am really I want them to go quarterback. I'm sick of having this feeling of, I hope they lose the next 3 games so we can get the 101 to get Caleb. Like, if we don't take quarterback this year, I fear that the entire year next year, even though it'll be exciting watching Jacoby Brissett throw to Marvin Harrison, I'm going to be sitting there going, but I really hope we freaking lose so we can go get Carson Beck or whatever the next big quarterback is. I can't remember. Quinn Ewers, Shadur Sanders.
But I guess that's the question. So that's 30 seconds. Would you rather take Harrison and the 6th best quarterback in the start of round 2, or would you rather take Drake May or whoever it's going to be like in the round 1 and then get some deepish wide receiver that could be okay in round 2?
I think you've seen so many examples of fantastic wide receivers being stuck on teams that never make playoffs, like Calvin Johnson and Larry Fitzgerald and Andre Johnson. DeAndre Hopkins, like where it's like, but you rarely see super elite quarterbacks stuck on teams that can't make playoffs. So I would rather say take the shot on quarterback and hope it works out, especially because this is supposed to be a super deep wide receiver class. You're looking at first round caliber talent in the early second and early third. Why not pair up, Jaden Daniels or Drake May with Keon Coleman or whoever the best receiver is that's still available? That's just, I don't know. We'll talk about it more next week. But yeah, we're 10 minutes in. We haven't even gotten to the OTQ yet. And I know everyone at home is dying to hear it. So Dave, one tough question. I hear this all the time. How does a player being valued at quote unquote his peak affect your decision to buy, sell, or hold him? Does this ever enter your thought process, similar to, I guess, maybe how you would look at a stock, like when it's depressed or when it's overvalued? Do you think that it's time to buy or sell, or you see it on someone else's team? I always hear people saying things like, "Oh, this player is priced at his peak. Go sell him right now." And I never, I don't quite agree with it, but I'm curious to hear how you would think about players and their values and whether your decision to buy or sell, and if your team comes into play when it comes to stuff like that. Are you always just looking to maximize value and minimize losses?
No, I've thought about this a lot in the last couple of years, as we talked about before in the last episode. Am I rebuilding or am I still going for championships? And I think that the variable for me, and I've had Devontae Adams on my team since the beginning. So if I valued it at that point, I should have sold him 4 times over, where he was a top 5 or top 3 wide receiver for 6 years in a row, whatever it was. I think that the way that I treat that, and the best way I can describe it would be it's when they're at their peak and you think they can't go further. And so, meaning like the best example
peak, yeah.
of what you just, sure. But I think it's to that point of like, if they could plateau there, not necessarily that has to be that like drop down, but it's kind of that example, right? So Devontae Adams already was the number 1 wide receiver going into several seasons in a row, or top 5 even in redraft for those several seasons. There was no reason for me to sell him because there wasn't any sell signals. There wasn't an age concern. There wasn't any like injury concern. There wasn't any things that were potentially like, hey, your potential coming to that peak trough that you might want to start getting out of him. But I think a good example of what you just did was Rachaad White and Nico Collins. To me, Nico, wherever you want to value him in dynasty /redraft, call him wide receiver 12. I don't think Nico's ever going to be better than wide receiver 12 in a season point wise, for an example.
Yeah.
Rachaad White, I don't even know where he finished, but say he's running back 6.
Wide receiver 4.
Running back 4.
And running back 4, yeah.
So it's like running back 6. I don't think I'm going to project Rachaad White to ever be running back 6 again, knowing who's coming in the league, knowing who is in the league. Like, I just don't see that happening. So it's kind of things like, do you think it can repeat, to decide, okay, if someone else believes a narrative I don't? It's almost like that point too, where there's conflicting narratives there too. And it's also especially on people that have not done it before. Like, for example, for me this season in my team, if the Commanders go get a QB that's awesome and Terry McLaurin's a stud, I'm selling him. If George Pickens comes out and he actually is wide receiver 1 6-7 weeks in the season, I'm going to go see what I can get for him, because he hasn't done it before. Terry McLaurin's been really always a starter, top 24 receiver, but not top 12. And so that's kind of the variability, that if you start to see something for the first time on someone that has either a pattern or record, or projecting that you don't think they're actually going to ever get beyond that, I 100% think that those are the opportunities to sell. And maybe the better way to say it too is when they're at peak value and you can get more than that value you're projecting going forward is. So like if you have a top 6 asset projecting consistently, so that would have been the Derrick Henrys, the Christian McCaffreys, the Devontae Adams, the Tyreek Hills, Stephon Diggs until last season, like, you're not selling that person unless you just wanted to build some depth, right? Just because they're at their peak. Because they have the history of doing. Justin Jefferson's a good example too. Whereas like Justin Jefferson, interestingly enough, and you said the Marvin Harrison thing too in the pre-show that I think could touch on as well. Justin Jefferson's a great example where I actually reached out to our manager who had him. I said, hey, are you like, what would it take to acquire Justin Jefferson? Because I think there's a lot of concerns.
I agree 100%.
And I'm looking at it from like, hey, I still think he's elite. I think he's now into that DeAndre Hopkins bad team layout where he still could be a top 12 wide receiver, but maybe he's 10 to 15 and not 1 to 4. And so let's see where this manager thinks. If this manager's in panic, I might buy that blood because I'll take the risk. I know, and I'm gonna try to buy him around like wide receiver 8, and maybe he's 10 to 15, maybe he's still 4 to 8. I don't know. Ultimately, he's said I would need to give him my first 2 borns and all this other stuff, and I was like, all right, like clearly you're not selling this guy. Fine,
that's not even enough. No.
Yeah, but then Marvin Harrison's another great example. Where like, what's the if you can go get a wide receiver 4 right now? Say you could go get Justin Jefferson for Marvin Harrison, or just like AJ Brown, or I forget who you just acquired. I don't know why I can't. I'm blanking on his name. Jamar Chase. Thank you. If you can get one of those guys older, you're going to have less years, but do you already kind of know like what you're getting? And they are in that top 6 range every year. If they QB's happy, everything else.
Gilday offered me Chase for the 1-on-1, and I said no. Like I'm a dumbass, but I was like, I just am too excited for Marvin Harrison.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
and that to me,
maybe I would have done it on draft day, but right now I didn't want to trade it.
And that's the trade for me. That's like that is the most obvious trade. Last year it would have been with Bijan. Yeah, and that's why I said to Max, I was like, dude, like the offers that I'm hearing you get, and I'm hearing other people be willing to make for Bijan, even if he is that valuable, you're still getting max value out of it right now, where there's injury concerns and everything else. Like, build that depth and have that other core around you that's rather as one player. Because once he's not running back 1 and going beating Christian McCaffrey records and all this other shit, his value is already dropping. Yeah. And so, so that's kind of my take on it. What is yours?
That's awesome. No, what's funny is you actually touched on a bunch of the things that I kind of prepared ahead of time. So I kind of what spawned this question was exactly what you talked about with Marvin Harrison. I saw some comment on like Reddit or something that was like, you should be selling Marvin Harrison right now. He's priced at wide receiver 4 or wide receiver 5. Go sell him right now. He's already priced at his peak. Like, go get a guy like Puka or Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, you just hope he does as good as those 2 guys. And I'm sitting there going like, why does being priced at a peak mean you have to sell? Like, and it got me thinking about all these different, I guess, combinations of, I guess, 2 things, which would be priced at your peak versus room to appreciate. Those are the only 2 possibilities a player technically has in your own mind. That's a personal assessment. And then on top of that, whether that current peak price is one of 3 things. Is it an overvalued peak price, an appropriately priced peak price, or an undervalued peak price? So I know it's kind of complicated, I guess, if you're trying to follow along at home. So I kind of put down some examples. So I think the intersection of priced at his peak and appropriately priced would be a guy like JJ. Yes, he's priced at his peak. He's wide receiver 1 overall. He cannot appreciate in value any more than he already has. That doesn't mean you go and sell JJ. He is the most that combination of asset, priced at his peak and appropriately priced. Josh Allen, Bijan Robinson. That's the most flexible piece in Dynasty because you can do whatever you want with it. You can hold it and keep your team strong. You can try to go buy him because even though he's priced at his peak, you're getting what you're paying for at that price. Or you can sell it and do so much with it. So it's the most flexible combination. The next combination I had here was priced at his peak and undervalued. And for guys like this, I had like Derrick Henry and Keenan Allen because those guys are not going to appreciate in value any more than Derrick Henry can go out tomorrow, run for 2,000 yards, and he's going to go down in value next year. So I had a designation of you hold those guys or it's a soft buy. So if you're looking to contend, those are the kind of guys you kick the tire on. You say, I'll give you the 204 this year. That's probably a pretty good deal for some managers who own those guys. So that's priced at his peak, but yet undervalued. The next one I think is the most interesting case, which is priced at his peak and overvalued to something where you said, I think this is the highest they'll ever be valued. And I don't think there's much they can do also to improve their value going into next year. And my example for this was Kyren Williams. And I think that's a hard sell because I think he's already priced as like a wide receiver. I mean, running back 5 or 6. Like I think it's the big 3 of Breece, Bijan, and Gibbs. Then you have that weird tier of like Christian McCaffrey versus Jonathan Taylor versus Devon Achane. And I think Kyren kind of lumps into that mix. And it's like, man, if Kyren just put up the season he just did, and the highest he could possibly get was running back 6 or 7, even if he repeats, he's not going up any higher. He just showed you his colors. And it's like, I saw something that was like, even if he comes out next year and does good 16 points per game, he's not going to go up in value. So it's like, that's a hard sell to me. Then on the inverse side of this is instead of being priced at their peak.
Well, hold on, just as a stat correction,
Yeah,
Kyren Williams by point per game was running back 2. He didn't play the first 2 or 3 games.
Right. He's I think his dynasty value, like according to some like a ranking keep trade cut, would say running back 4 to 8. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but
and we need a whole debate on keep trade cut being an evaluator. It's terrible.
No, I think honestly, I think those types of tools are good for looking at how does the market feel about my guy. Not necessarily
but that's not a market. Trade. That's just some guy pushing buttons and saying, "Yeah, I just think this," but he doesn't know anything.
It's the wisdom of the crowd. It's all crowdsourced. There's no person on.
Yeah, but that's just terrible. That's just terrible data. That just means it's bad data.
I guess so. Again, it's just a pulse check. I don't think it's the end all be all, but I think it's a good way to say, okay, is this guy? If I say to you, hey, I think I like Devon A-Chain a little better than Kyren Williams, and you say you're an absolute idiot for thinking that. I go, me and 10 million other people kind of say they're pretty close. So calling me an idiot is misguided. But so the next one would be on the inverse. Instead of price at their peak, it's room for appreciation and value. And again, there's 3 intersections of room for appreciation, but valued appropriately. And I think those are like rookie picks. They're maybe slightly overvalued, but I think they're priced appropriately in a sense that you can buy equivalent hype players, but they obviously all still have a chance to become the wide receiver 1 or the running back 1. Or I think guys like Jalen Waddle and Devonta Smith and I guess wide receiver 2s on a good offense and that have a good wide receiver in front of them they have room to appreciate. Tyreek Hill goes down, Waddle's going up. The AJ Brown gets traded, Devonta Smith's going up, but they're appropriately priced. You're not getting a discount on them. Every manager who owns them knows the same thing I'm saying. It's not shocking. The next is kind of the example I think we were talking about earlier, which is an overvalued asset that still has room for appreciation. And I think that's guys like Marvin Harrison Jr., I think he's overvalued right now, but yet I still think he has the chance to become wide receiver 1 overall. Puka Nacua, he's probably overvalued a little bit. He's wide receiver 5, but if he puts another good season together, he's probably going up to wide receiver 1. Guy like JSN, he had a terrible season. He's still somehow ranked in the top 20 dynasty receivers, but I think he's overvalued, but yet he could go out, smash, and now all of a sudden he's a top 5 wide receiver next year or some whatever. And I think those are guys you either hold or you soft sell them. You consider offers, but you don't necessarily have to take them. And the last one, I'm trying to wrap this up quick, is room for appreciation, but they're undervalued. And I think these are all depressed assets that once had hype. So you got to think of like Trey Lance, Jameson Williams, Quentin Johnston. These are all guys that are undervalued assets right now, and there's room for them to grow. And I think those are, if you have them, you can hold if you want, or you hard buy them, because those former first round pick receivers, those former top draft capital running backs and quarterbacks, yeah, they may be worth nothing right now, but it only takes one opportunity, one injury, one stretch of 4 or 5 good games in a row for them to be like a Nico Collins did last year, to go from worth a late second, early third to being worth a couple first round picks. So that's my analysis. If you have any agreements or disagreements, let me know. Otherwise, we can move on to the roster reviews.
No, I think it was well said. I think that's exactly the point you're trying to say, though, is like, can they actually become higher valued than they are today? And I think at the same time that can be a good buying opportunity. It's just a matter of where everyone's mindset is, because if both people think they can go higher, then they're both going to kind of still overvalue them, versus if like the person acquiring thinks they can go higher and the person selling thinks they're not going to reach that level again, you can maybe find a deal. So it's just kind of understanding the psyche behind it. But yeah,
no, it's funny you say that, because I think I was talking to Dan about trades with Treylon Burks and Jahan Dotson and Rashad Bateman, and he kept saying, man, I don't think I would even give a 4th for Treylon Burks right now. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, and what are you trying to get for Jahan Dotson? He's like, I'm hoping to get a 2nd. I'm like, they're the same player. They both were first round picks that have had a good stretch of efficiency riddled with injuries or bad QB play. And I'm like, but like you said, we both I view Burks as a potential could be worth a 1st again someday. Just like Dotson, just like Jameson Williams, just like Quentin Johnston. All those guys still have some semblance of hype behind them. And I think kicking the tires on them is great. And like you said, if we both have that idea, they could be worth a 1st again. You're not going to get a deal done, but you don't know until you ask.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, let's move on to our where did our overlay go? Our roster review series. So we're moving on to the last few rosters. And the first one we have up is we switched places. I'm on the top. You're on the bottom. Classic Dave on the power bottom. Oh, you you son of a bitch. All right. So we have the North Carolina Sasquatch here. This is one of the probably I'd say one of the strongest teams our league has ever seen. They've made playoffs 4 out of 5 years. They have a career 43-25 record with good for a 63% win percentage. But the funny thing here is and I have a typo in here, they actually had a second place finish in 2022, not a fourth. But if you look here, they've come in 4th, 8th, 3rd, 2nd, 4th. So they've made the semis 4 out of 5 years, only been able to get to the ship once, losing in the DeMar Hamlin crazy game last year. But again, one of the more strong rosters. Let's go through and look at, how they got there and where they're at now. So looking ahead here, they have in 2021, they had Jalen Hurts at quarterback. They had DeAndre Swift and Dalvin Cook at running back. They had Jamar Chase and AJ Brown at wide receiver with DJ Moore and DK Metcalf on the bench and Deebo Samuel at flex. Their wide receivers were filthy in 2021. Keep in mind, this was 25-year-old Deebo, 24-year-old AJ Brown, 21-year-old Chase, 24-year-old DK. Then they had Gerald Everett in the tight end slot with TJ Hawkinson on IR. And then looking at their picks, they had traded away their 2022 first and second and had all the rest of their 23 and 24 picks. Moving on to 2024, this is their roster today. They still have Jalen Hurts at QB. They have Alvin Kamara, Tony Pollard, Rachaad White, and DeAndre Swift are their running backs. They now have AJ Brown, Nico Collins, Jalen Waddle, and I guess Christian Watson is their only other notable wide receiver on the roster. They have CJ Stroud backing up Jalen Hurts. And I think they have Jonathan Mingo on taxi. And I didn't include their draft picks for some reason. That was a mistake. They do have the 104 this year, but they do not have any other picks for the next 2 years. So they are a team that mortgaged their future to put together a strong, sturdy win now team. I'm going to pull up their trades real quick. We can go through one of them. I think the big trade you've already talked about was the 2 firsts and seconds for Jalen Waddle. That was back in that preseason of 2023. Looking back a few years, they traded away Miles Sanders and a 2022 first for AJ Brown. They traded away a 2023 first and third for Leonard Fournette. And a big one they made middle of last season was they traded away Anthony Richardson and Michael Pittman to get CJ Stroud and Alvin Kamara. I thought that was a pretty interesting trade because Stroud had not yet broken out. Richardson was viewed as the quarterback darling of the class for his rushing upside. So it was a risky trade. It looks like it kind of worked out to some extent with Stroud now being a top 3 QB. But yeah, Dave, going back to their 2024 roster, you get dropped in. If you're taking over the Sasquatch, what direction are you taking this team in? I mean, I think there's one clear direction, but I'm curious to hear how you might approach this team for the rest of the offseason.
He already fucked it because he gave away Jamar Chase. So, I mean, that to me was the most shocking trade I've ever seen.
Okay, wait, that's good. Before you even start, let's take out Nico Collins from his starting lineup. Take out Rachaad White from his starting lineup.
Yep.
Let's presume at 104 he would have gotten Brock Bowers to put at tight end. So now his starting lineup would have been Hurts, Kamara, and Pollard at running back, AJ Brown and Jamar Chase at wide receiver. He has Malik Heath at tight end. He doesn't even have a tight end. I think he has Taysom Hill.
No, Hawkinson.
Hawkinson's has ACL surgery. He's out for the year, or he's out for 10 weeks. His flex would be Jalen Waddle and Dalvin Cook, DeAndre Swift. And then his best player off the bench would have been Christian Watson. So, yeah, his lineup looks a little better with Jamar Chase and Swift in there instead of Nico and Rachaad White. But now he doesn't have Bowers at tight end. He doesn't have a tight end. I think it was
we don't know how long TJ is going to be out. It says the first month. I'm not banking on him being out the entire season. And so I think it's okay, I'm not saying you shouldn't have sold pieces. I'm saying here's what I would have done. If I was selling Jamar Chase, I wouldn't have gotten other assets. I would have gotten picks. Like he just traded 2 firsts and 2 seconds for Jalen Waddle. Go get 3 firsts and 3 seconds for Jamar Chase. And
that's
whatever
one way, but then you become not competitive. Now he got 3 starting assets for.
I know, but here's the thing. Like let's digest his roster a little bit on that.
I'll let you go. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Piece. It's all right. So like my take was keep Jamar Chase, potentially sell other assets, potentially sell Hawkinson to someone that doesn't need Hawkinson, and go get a tight end 10 instead of having a tight end 4 potentially. And if the person's not paying that much attention, either A, doesn't know Hawk's hurt, or if they know he's hurt a little bit and gonna miss a month, maybe they still view him as a tight end 5-ish, and they're willing to give you tight end 8 to like delay that, or tight end 9. I don't know if they view that also with the quarterback in flux too. So like there's questions, but if you could sell Hawk for something, potentially let Jalen Waddle. I don't know where Jalen Waddle's value is at.
Right.
People, I don't want to give away my value for him. I think my value for Waddle is still probably higher than most after last season, because I don't know how long Tyreek's going to be there. I think Jalen Waddle can be a wide receiver 1, but last season sucked, and so I'd probably still pay 2 firsts and maybe a second for him. But other people are probably like, no, I'll give you a first and second, man. And so I don't know where if Matt's down on the manager of Sasquatch is down on Waddle, he's like, oh, I can only get a first for him, and that's not worth it to me because I spent so much last year. And so it's evaluating those pieces of like, what else could you get rid of? Could you get a second for Christian Watson and grab a wide receiver? Like, so there's the pieces there of like, what are you trying to do? And because of the way his team's comped, right? Let's like evaluate that with Jamar Chase in. You have AJ Brown, you have Chase, they're kind of in their primes. Mm-hmm. You have Jalen Waddle, who's young, about to be in his prime in say a year or two. You have old Kamara Pollard. You have still good Hertz, and you have a great backup in Stroud, very young. And so you have this nice mix of prime, old, and young. Go trade one of those also young, exciting people that you have, and go get a couple depth older guy. Like if you could potentially turn Waddle into like Hill and like an old RB. I don't know who at the top of my head, but like, why not make that trade? Where
I think you're conflating your value of Nico and Rachaad White with what maybe the average person might think.
No, hold on. So I'm not from the point of like, and I guess my point being, if you're going for it right now, why give up the best asset in the deal? My goal is if you had where he had his team at, I would have been looking to get better players, but older players to fill out to go compete now. So if you can turn Waddle, Hill is a better player next year, projecting.
Right, definitely.
So even if you do that straight up trade, that's a better trade, right? And if you have a couple other young pieces, like I don't know where Watson lands, but maybe it's a Watson and a DeAndre Swift combo to go get another valued starter. Mm-hmm. Do those things. The other thing, again, that I don't know, I think I touted on a show before, maybe not, but I know I've talked to managers about. Immediately after the draft, he gets 4 more draft picks.
Right.
So you're going to have a first round pick that you can go trade for 3 months leading into the season to go get another asset to fill out your roster. And a lot of people are still interested in first round picks, especially right after the draft. And they're like, oh, I wish I had a first round pick. You know, so it's like will have assets. I know he doesn't have it on paper right now, but he will in 3 weeks or probably, I guess, like now more like a month or 2 for us when we actually do our rookie draft. So say 5
month or 2, better not be a month or 2.
Say in 5 or 6 weeks, he has these other picks. It's like you have 4 months to go acquire that extra player that you need. And now your roster looks solid. Okay. You know, and like, or if people still view Pollard good going in Tennessee, I don't know if they do. What could you get for Pollard to get an older RB and a third? I don't know. There was too many other optionality things. Is one. If you're going to sell, the
past is the past.
Hold on.
Let's talk about.
Okay, so he sold Jamar Chase. That's fine. I wish I got picks. Since I didn't, I personally would tear down the roster. I would get max value for everything I can now or going into the season that I'm not willing to hold on to for the next 5 years.
Interesting.
I would go.
I was going to say. Now that the trade is done, you look at this roster and you don't think it's
if I got dropped. So you're saying I got dropped this roster. I would see who I can get at the 104. See if I'm happy about that. I would probably try to trade the 104 for the 108 and the 112 or some combination of that. or
Yeah.
the 108 and the 201. I don't know what the picks look like we can do, but
Right.
I would try to trade the 104 personally with how deep this draft looks. If I'm looking here, I need depth anyways. I would try to piece that out potentially. And then at the same time, I would probably just consider like, what else can I fucking get now that I can? We just talked about the peaks and troughs of players. Like AJ Brown's pretty fucking high up in value.
Yeah.
And so I would try to piece that out. If the rest of everyone thinks Nico and Rashad White are great, fucking I'm selling them again. And I'm gonna go get firsts for them and seconds. Because if that value is there, great. Go give me the 104, the 108, the 2-1, and the 2-5, and the 3-3. And then all right, now I actually have a full roster draft I can go through and do, and then there's some of my starters. But like, yeah, there's just that's what I would do with this roster because realistically, next season Kamara's probably not starting. Next season, Pollard could have been this another roster split where he might be in. It looks like the Steelers' backfield. AJ Brown's still great. Nico Collins, I'm going to call him wide receiver 18. TJ Hawkinson, maybe he comes back, but I'm saying quarterback kind of stinks. He's probably tight end 15. Jalen Waddle could be on the upcoming. Rashad White, I think it's gonna be the same thing. Running back 12, and I think he might not be the starter the year after. And so all those things together, like it's either a win now or sell now. And if that value is there to sell, and people are at their peak and people are paying for that, catch your value. You still have some cores you can build around. Maybe you can bounce back, not in 2024 to 5 season, but in the 2025, 2026 season, you might be contending again because of some of the young studs you have.
Yeah. No, I liked your thought about that. I definitely agree with, well, especially since the news, since the trade where, after the trade, the Texans signed Stephon Diggs, which definitely hurts Nico's ceiling. There's no way to say that otherwise. It definitely limits his upside on a week-to-week basis. I still think he's a fantastic receiver. I still think it was a good trade in a vacuum. But looking at the roster now with the trades you've already made, I think if I'm the Sasquatch, I package up Nico Collins, Rashad White, and the 104, and I go get a receiver like Jamar Chase. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding. So if I'm the Sasquatch, I'm looking at my team, and I personally, I don't. So it's just my philosophy, which we're going to get to when we get to the Wyverns, is I don't like trading from a position of need, and I think that's kind of, whether you like it or not, what forced his hand. Didn't have to make the trade, but looking at his team pre-trade, like we talked about, his best bench piece before the pre-trade was Christian Watson. And that's not somebody you want to plug. I mean, I guess you're happy plugging him in a flex, but
sure. But pause real quick on that exact thought though. The more frustrating thing for me, and I know he didn't talk to me about it, and I don't know how many other managers he didn't. I know a few others did not hear from him. If I'm selling one of the best players in the league, I am throwing that out to every single person and creating a bidding war. And that to me, in a neat situation, still, I don't think there's a team that wouldn't have put a bid in for Chase. Even if they knew they couldn't get him, there would have been a bid out there that he can now actually compare the pieces to be like, all right, that looks good or bad. Like, in a perfect example, go get the 102 and Sam Laporta for Jamar Chase. I don't know if that happened.
I'd rather have the other package.
Oh, okay. But maybe you can throw something else in there too if you want, but I wouldn't. That's my evaluation. But I'm saying,
it does satisfy the tight end need. You're right.
It's a different question mark of like, evaluate that, and like. But if you put that in a vacuum too, I know you still get the Rashad White piece. But if it was Nico or Odunze versus Brock Bowers and Sam Laporta, like
you're right.
Odunze Laporta looks a lot better, and then Rashad, what we said, might not be the starting running back in a year. So I don't know. Like that's the thing that to me was like the biggest surprise. Like I don't care if Jamar Chase gets traded. I don't care if that's the trade. My weird frustration or like surprise was it didn't feel like that was a very shopped around thing. Like you're selling one of the best players in the league, and it's just no one knew about it.
Yeah, wheeling and dealing behind the scenes. But so the thing, I think the first thing I would do with this team is I'm happy now with my depth that I have a strong running back off my bench if I need it, and I have a strong-ish wide receiver off my bench if I need it. I now have DeAndre Swift on my bench, which is nice. And I have I'm saying my philosophy is I don't like having to pay up for needs. So like I look at
DeAndre Swift's not even. You don't even know if he's going to be the starting running back.
He is in Chicago. Whatever. Anyways, he was wide receiver. I think he was running back 9 last year. So I hard for me to say he's not a good bench piece. But the thing I would think I would do is I would capitalize on Stroud's perceived upside, and I think I like having the Eagles stack, or I like having the Texans stack. But I think the Stroud hype's gotten so out of control that I would be willing to sell Stroud actually a little bit, quote unquote, low, and maybe get one more pick somehow and a very, very cheap QB. Like I would go get a Baker Mayfield and the 201. Like the dirt of the dirt. And some people might say you're selling way too low on Stroud. And he's going, but just when you have Jalen Hurts, if you need to go to your bench QB, you're probably already in trouble. Because now if Jalen Hurts goes down for the season, AJ Brown is also suffering. He's already in a world of hurt. So you might as well break up your backup QB into multiple assets and fill out your team that way. Just the one trade I would explore would be the CJ Stroud move, because I think his hyped out of control. I think he's going top 3 pick in startups right now in Superflex, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I couldn't take him ahead of Jalen Hurts.
But it's the same question, or is it sell Jalen Hurts for his backs? Like I'd shop both. Like
I think it's one or the other.
And in our league, you don't have to have both. Yeah, 100%.
Right. I think Stroud is overvalued right now, and I think Hurts is kind of appropriately priced. I think it goes back to our discussion.
But if it goes back to that thing of also the perceived value of the other managers and what he can get, because if he's going to undersell Stroud versus appropriately sell Hurts, I might just appropriate sell Hurts and then just bank on Stroud. And Stroud's a lot younger. Hopefully, you're going to get even more years with him. But I think that the challenge that I have, right, is like if you look at this roster just right now, Kamara has Jamal Williams and Kondre Miller. Tony Pollard has Tajay Spears. AJ Brown has Devontae Smith, who just got re-signed. Nico has Diggs and Dell. TJ has an unknown QB. Jalen Waddle is the upside. Jalen Waddle probably is the future for the Dolphins, hopefully at wide receiver 1. But you don't know from draft, but banking on that is he's the one that is like the person that can peak further, I guess, if you want to call it that way. And Rachaad White's like such an unknown. All of his bench is in that same thing. I guess there's one thing that maybe can be the difference maker there is Christian Watson ends up being good. Yeah, I'm not banking on it, but it could happen, I guess. But so there's nothing else in this roster that I'm walking into. Like, there's nothing in this roster that I'd bet you money on is going to be great in season 2 of me having this roster, except for maybe Jalen Waddle.
Interesting.
And I think the other challenge too is like if you look at the picks, right? We know we were talking about Marvin Harrison earlier, like, and we talked about kind of the value of him versus Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, I would bet a lot of money Amon-Ra is going to be on points per game top 10. I would bet the same amount of money that Marvin Harrison is not.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of that same duality, like maybe in the future, and sure, in year 2, 3, 4, he could. I'm not saying that's not going to happen ever or even for a long period of time. Year 1, I don't think it's going to happen. And so that's the other kind of like variable there when you're looking at some of these picks that he might get in Brock Bowers. Like, I'm not betting on Brock Bowers being a top 6 tight end. Like, I just would be a dumb bet. And so like, that's also kind of that thing. Like, this team to me has a 1-year lifespan, and then it's chop. And that's where it's almost, to me, if I'm already in that uncomfortable situation where my depth really isn't depth, it's just perceived depth. I would probably just try to piecemeal out whatever I can get, sell thing at their peak. Because on paper, you can get a lot of shit for his assets right now. Especially like the running backs. Once we hit the season, Pollard, if he comes out the gate good, and Kamara, like,
that's what I was going to get to.
You could maybe get another first there. I don't know.
The big thing I was looking at was, you just said everything about, like, right now, nobody wants Kamara, Tony, and Pollard right now. When that season comes around, they're going to be attractive assets, assuming they are the lead backs of their respective teams. And I think they're going to be, but the problem is, if anything happens to them, he's got a very thin running back room. You already said there's some reservations about DeAndre Swift. There's some reservations about Pollard and Kamara. Like, Rachaad White might be the only running back who technically right now doesn't have competition, but like, his running back room is definitely his weakest room of all the skill positions. I mean, and I'm assuming he's getting Brock Bowers, which is why I think, he's basically the best tight end prospect that we've ever seen since, like, I don't know. He's better. He was better than Pitts. So it's like, and he was the best one ever at the time. So,
so that didn't work out very well.
Yeah, I know, the torn MCL sucks. But anyway, so I think we spent enough time on the Sasquatch. I think this is a top 3 lineup in the league. I think it's positioned nicely between youth and aging players. And I think the one thing will be going into the season is how he strategically utilizes his perceived 4-headed RB room to maybe slim down to 3 and pick up some capital on the way. Even if it's tearing down for what looks like an unsexy tear down of Tony Pollard for, Raheem Mostert in a second. It's a bad trade, but I'm trying to think of something similar to where like you're tearing down, but you're picking up some capital on the way.
If I'm him, if there's one thing to talk about the running backs, I would go trade parity. So I would say, okay, I'll give you Pollard for Condre Miller and something, or I'd give you Kamara for Tyjae Spears and something. Like,
yeah, that's such a really good
and hopefully it's the same, and it potentially it's the same manager, but like at least then you're stacking something, so you have that probable future or other piece. Whoever ends up winning wins, and then maybe you get a second or a third tied to it too, that you can try to hit on somebody or package that with something else to go get. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, that being said, let's move on to our next team. We're now moving on to the. Actually, technically, they've been newly named the Miami Anolis or Cannolis or something, but we're going to stick with their old team name because that's when this graphic was made. The Miami Cyberkongz. And this has been definitely one of the best managers in the league so far. They took a productive struggle approach in year one. For anyone who's unfamiliar, they basically punted year one and accumulated value across their roster with the intent of building a competitive team for the future. In our startup, I specifically remember they went RB heavy. They drafted 4 straight running backs. I think they drafted Chubb, David Montgomery, like Josh Jacobs, maybe Kerryon Johnson. I don't know, whoever it was at the time. And they just went running back. And then immediately midway through the season, we're trading running backs to contenders for draft picks and wide receivers. So going through their finish, they went 10th, 3-10 in our first year, finishing in 10th place. Followed that up with 4 straight playoff bursts, including a 4th place finish in 2020, a back-to-back championship run in 21 and 22, and then followed that up with a runner-up loss in 2023. So this team has been on a tear. They've made the playoffs 4 straight years, made the finals 3 years in a row. And when I show you this team from 2021, you're going to go, how the F did this team ever lose again? And they basically haven't. So looking at their 2021 roster, they had Josh Allen at quarterback. They had Jonathan Taylor and Najee Harris at running back with J.K. Dobbins on IR and David Montgomery in the flex. So their running backs were absolutely loaded. That was Najee's RB4 finish. David Montgomery was a 24-year-old at the time. J.K. Dobbins, RIP, was dealing with an ACL injury, but he was highly regarded at Ohio State. He had Justin Jefferson and Amari Cooper were his wide receivers with T. Higgins and Michael Pittman on the bench. And this was, I think, pre-Pittman breakout. And then we look at his picks. He had 2 2022 seconds and thirds. He had a 2023 first, no second, and a 2024 first and second. So they had made a few trades. Obviously, given up their own first-round pick. They built out a really strong roster. Oh, and they had Mark Andrews at tight end. Sorry for glossing over that. The tight end won them the 2021 season, I think. Or 2022. Now let's look at their roster today. They still have Josh Allen at quarterback. They have Jonathan Taylor and Breece Hall at running back with J.K. Dobbins yet again on IR with Jalen Warren and Keaton Mitchell as kind of stopgap running backs. Najee still on the bench. Tyjae Spears on the bench. Zach Moss, who's technically an RB1 on the Bengals on the bench. Sheesh. They got Cooper Kupp, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Justin Jefferson as the only wide receivers on the roster with Mark Andrews on IR and Tucker Kraft as their starting tight end. And then when you look at their picks, they have their 2024 first this year, the 111, 2025 first and second, and no 2026 first. So if I go back and look at some of their trades, I think the big one I wanted to bring up, because we've already talked about the Amon-Ra St. Brown trade, was the Josh Allen trade. In 2021 midseason, they traded Damian Harris, Daniel Jones, their 2022 first and 2023 second, to go get Josh Allen prior to him really breaking out as the QB1. And so I give him so much credit for identifying the potential of Josh Allen's skill set, because now Brent has had the QB1 overall for the last 3-4 seasons, basically, or QB2. And there's a few other creative trades in here. There's the Breece Hall trade, which you may remember. They traded away in the Amon-Ra St. Brown deal. Now that I have it in front of me, it's David Montgomery, Jahan Dotson in the 212, what ended up becoming the 212 for Amon-Ra St. Brown and a couple thirds. So that trade is an absolute smash fleecing. Dotson and Monty for Amon-Ra St. Brown isn't even close. He's just done a really good job of identifying talent and skill and going to get it. And he's hit on all his draft picks. He's nailed his trades. Like, he's built an absolute freaking juggernaut of a team. Dave, you know the drill. What do you if you're getting dropped into the under the Cyberkongz, what deal, if any, are you making?
Dude, I'm so excited. I think this is the first season Brent's gonna actually do really bad. Let's run through it. I think the rumor out there is that the Ravens are going to run no more 2 tight end sets. I don't think Mark Andrews is going to be a top 4 tight end. I think it would be 3 through 8. He could be tight end 3, and he could still have the upside. But I just don't think he's going to be. I don't think he's going to be in the top 4. I think he's going to be 5 and above. And even if he's not, I don't think there's anyone else in his roster that I'm like excited about for tight end. Second, Kupp and Jefferson are huge wild cards. And that's where I'm really surprised with only Josh Palmer on the bench that he doesn't have he wasn't even really interested in the Jefferson conversation. Not necessarily with me, but it sounded like in general. Kupp, I mean, if it's not his last season, it's getting pretty damn close to it. And Puka's clearly going to be that stud that's, if not dominating time, taking up a large chunk of his upside to Kupp. The rest of his roster, it's hard to hate anything. And so if I'm him, I'm looking to do a couple things. The first thing I'd actually probably try to do is I would probably just go try to, and I was surprised I didn't do it last season. I really was. And I almost made offers on single pieces. Partner and put up Najee and Jalen and get them the fuck off your roster.
That's
what are they doing?
Good plan. I never thought of that.
Like, you don't need them. They're both averaging combined 18 to 20 points a game, but like, why do you need one doing 10? Go get someone doing 20. Like, and you're in a PPR league. You don't need to be playing this guessing game of who's who. Go get another wide receiver. And then you have that depth too. You still have Tajay on your bench, who I think Tajay could potentially be a starter for him this season. And it's going to be the same thing. The Tajay, we'll just look at the, oh my God, I'm blanking on him.
Tony Pollard?
Tony Pollard, thank you. Yeah. Jeez, I'm really tired. I can't remember anyone's name now. But yeah, so you have the Tony Pollard optionality there too. Like, not saying you should go trade the Najee and Jalen to the Sasquatch, but my point is, like, those are good pieces. You don't know what's going to happen. If I'm him, I'm trading that right now before the draft, because I don't want to see a third running back into that mix. I don't want to see anything else happen. Like, I would sell those right now. And I think that there is, like, I'm a buyer of Jalen. I'm not a buyer of Najee, but together, if that's a good enough deal, I'd move a piece, you know, and whatever that piece is, even if it's like a Terry McLaurin or like not John, but like something else in that ballpark that's like going to be a starter in the league, just to have someone that's going to get you on average more than 10. Because right now, Jalen and Najee are averaging that. I'd love to see another quarterback at some point, like, and maybe
Will Levis.
Maybe he can grab one of the 311 based on how our draft goes, because we don't really value those rookie QBs that much, that potentially he can grab one of the 311. Keaton Mitchell's an opportunistic running back to sell or get some value out of too, or just kind of hold him for the future. So I don't know, like there's good pieces. I think that the interesting thing about Brent is that he's really good at identifying and having running back talent. It's one of the things you probably don't want a bunch of on your team going into a season. And like some of the young ones that can build into is fine, but like going in, like his worst position for his team is right now, I think, because he has such this young running back talent and talented back room that what if the Colts do draft another running back and now it's Jonathan Taylor, but they kind of just want to start building another young guy because of the Jonathan Taylor fiasco that kind of has been happening last year and a half. I don't know. So I think I'm so curious, because I think that he did do such a good job. He has hit on most all of his trades. He's hit on almost all of his picks. But I think he's coming to this point where I think initially he identified the opportunity to go get the rookies. I think he has been stuck in his ways of valuing his players maybe a little bit too high, especially the studs, and not trying to be like, all right, like Justin Jefferson's going into a question mark. I don't know. St. Brown is not really. I mean, a little bit with like, is Sam Laporta as good as he's going to be? Do they have another wide receiver? Like, what else is going to happen there? But I think Ross is pretty safe. Kupp is still another big wild card that he kind of escaped last year. Get the value you can now. The guy's only getting fucking older. And the rest of his room is elite. So yeah, those are probably the trades I'm making. It's not a rebuild yet. There's still plenty of young talent there. The running backs you have plenty of years with, and you can even start if you need to. You could probably trade one of those for 2 good wide receivers to a team that's trying to compete. So, yeah.
No, I think you brought up some really creative trades, especially the pairing Najee and Warren together to somebody who might need running back depth and going to get another piece. And I'm looking at I mean, I know we keep calling on them because it's the most obvious team that needs running backs is the Mermen. And why not pair Warren and Najee together to go get that's not enough for Zay Flowers, but close, like something like that. Like where you're because he's got a plethora of wide receivers right now. You could pair them both together, go get another wide receiver from Bohm. Bohm can fill out his running back room with both the Steelers. No, but like that type of deal. But you make such a good point. Like, and I don't want to slander Brent in any way, but he's nailed it. Like, there's nothing to really criticize. I think you're right in kind of like the way you just somehow were able to criticize Gilday's team, even because I think it's a top 3 team. But the cracks in the armor are starting to form. There's a cracks in the armor of Brent's team are starting to form with Cup getting older. JT's, I mean, he's not older, he's 25, but he is on his second contract. Like, that's a big deal. And his no wide receiver depth to speak of. And this gets back to last year when, and I think I referenced it in a previous show, I made an offer midseason of Calvin Ridley and Nico Collins for Amon-Ra St. Brown when he was dealing with Jefferson. Jefferson was injured, Mark Andrews was injured, and I was like, yeah, it's not like the best trade you've ever seen, but it certainly shouldn't have been insulting. And Brent was like, why the fuck do I need 2 wide receivers? I can't start them both. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't have any depth whatsoever. You're putting in Josh Palmer on bye weeks, and he's like, you can't start depth. And I'm like, you kind of, and it goes back to just difference in philosophy, which I find so fascinating. Is Brent is a very heavy studs and duds mentality player, and it's worked out for 2 years because he didn't suffer any injuries. And then as soon as he suffered injuries, you bet your ass the rest of the league heard about it on a weekly basis about his IR. So it's like, it's funny how, like, yes, you can live and die by this glass cannon strategy of I'm only going to go for, I'm going to consolidate everything together and go get studs. And then when you suffer injuries, you can no longer complain about your injuries when you refuse to buy depth. So that's getting back to this team is, I think you're right. I think Justin Jefferson is, I'm sorry. I don't think he has any business being ranked so far ahead of Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb right now. I think he's a phenomenal talent, a record-setting talent through his first 4 seasons. But we've seen how many phenomenal appearing receivers get saddled on terrible QB teams and put up very good seasons, but not the most. Look at DJ Moore for 5 years in Carolina. Was regarded as one of the best wide receiver prospects of his class. It has nothing to show for it after 5 years. It's way less. I'm not saying DJ Moore is JJ, but like you mentioned with DeAndre Hopkins, like, yes, he's put up very good seasons. I don't think he's ever put up a wide receiver 1 overall season when he had Ryan Fitzpatrick throwing to him and Matt Schaub. Like, I don't even remember who else he might have had when he was with the Texans. But the hard part here is I don't think there's many deals here to be made. I think you touched on a good one. For right now, I think you're not going to get proper value.
Would you do Tank Dell and George Pickens for Amon-Ra St. Brown?
I personally don't think I would, but I don't think it's a bad offer. Like, I think it's one that would at least get the doors open. If you made that offer, I'd be like, okay, let me see how I can creatively make this something I would want. I think I would want a pick involved somehow too. I think the big thing with these top tier, top 5, top 8 assets is, to me, it's got to be a 3-for-1 in some facet, unless you're getting 2 very elite proven guys, or I want 3 shots in the dark, or I have 3 outs to win this trade. Where, and I hate to use my trade as an example because I don't want to keep hashing out this trade, but like the idea of, well, it's funny because we're going to get to my trades and I'm going to show a 3-for-1 is, I like the idea of I don't need Nico Collins to be better than Chase to win the trade. I need the combination of Nico and one other piece to be better to win that trade. If all 3 hit, I smash the trade. The only way I lose the trade is if all 3 kind of fizzle out. So it's like, if I'm trading away a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown or Justin Jefferson, I'm trying to get a 3-for-1 done. And I'm not going to get picks unless I'm rebuilding. So I'm going to try to give me Tank Dell, give me George Pickens, and give me the 107. And then I'm in business. Like, that's the type of deal where I'm like, I'm willing to sell off my best asset to have 3 cracks at. Because, like, you want to say that certain players have only done it for 1 year. George Pickens and Tank Dell have also only had 1 year of strong productivity. So if you want me to settle for 2 23, 24-year-old guys, I need 1 more asset to really consider moving off those guys. I think I probably, kind of like what you were saying, I don't want so much roster equity tied up in running back. I think I'm trying to creatively move Keaton Mitchell and Zach Moss. While Moss is perceived as an RB1 and Keaton Mitchell is perceived as this high upside handcuff, I'm trying to send them up. Maybe I could send them to you for Well, it wouldn't make sense to send it for Henry, but send it to somebody like a Derrick Henry. But it would have been perfect because you would now have Henry's handcuff. But if you can go get another running back or a wide receiver piece, send Zach Moss and Keaton Mitchell. Any combination of these running backs. I think that the Ty J. Spears trade you mentioned earlier was super creative. You send Ty J. Spears and Zach Moss to Gilday for Alvin Kamara. Now you get Kamara to throw or to go get Jalen Waddle or some kind of that's a terrible offer again. I'm sorry, but it's some sort of combination to peer up two of your running backs together to go get one more receiver because you need a fourth.
Exactly. No, I think that's exactly the opportunity.
All right. Nice. Brent, nice job. Don't have much critique for your roster. Let's move on to the last roster, the one we've all been waiting for. Your host, the Sultan, the swag, Joe, the Worcester Wyverns. This is the only other two-time champ in the league. They won the inaugural season, going 11-2 in their first year. Coming in first, they followed that up with two straight playoff exits. They came in third and fifth in their following 2 years, despite pretty lackluster, mediocre records of 7-6 and 6-8. They had a soft reset or a reload in 2022. Followed that up with another 500 season in 2023, where they took home the championship. So their placements are first, third, fifth, ninth, and first. Lifetime career record of 36 and 32 is kind of underwhelming, but I mean, they've won 2 championships, so they've won when it counts. They've placed in the money 3 times. It's a team that finds a way to win. Let's look at their 2021 roster. So at the end of 2021, they had Lamar Jackson at quarterback. They had Chase Edmonds and Mike Davis, who had a good year because of McCaffrey's injury. Chase Edmonds and Mike Davis were their running backs, with Leonard Fournette on the bench and Chris Carson on IR and Travis Etienne on taxi. Their wide receivers were Mike Williams and Odell Beckham Jr., with Calvin Ridley on suspension on his bench, Nico Collins on the bench 2 years ago, and Michael Thomas also on IR. Oh my God, what a painstaking travesty of a story Michael Thomas is. And then when you look at the picks, they had 2 22 firsts. One of them became the 103. They had 3 2023 firsts and 2 2024 firsts. So this team had they had 2 2024 seconds. This team had prioritized accumulating picks at this time. So this is right before that reload of a team. Now let's look at their 2024 roster. We're looking at Lamar still at quarterback, probably one of the longest tenured players in the league with the team. There's only a few guys left, I think, that are still on their startup draft rosters, like Devontae Adams. Lamar Jackson at quarterback. You have Jahmyr Gibbs and Travis Etienne and Devon Achane are the running backs, with Zach Charbonnet also on the bench. And they have CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Drake London, Calvin Ridley, Jackson Smith and Jigba are the receivers, with Trey McBride and Dalton Kincaid at tight end. And for picks, they have the 101 this year and the 109 this year, in a 2025 first, no 2026 picks. I'm going to bring up the trades. This is probably, if not the most active trader in the league, one of the most, along with the Apes and the Shuckles. I have a few of the trades since 2021 on the screen, and I highlighted the one kind of similar to what we were just talking about that I wanted to touch on, which was in 2021, I traded away Christian McCaffrey in his prime, 24 years old, for 2022, 2023, and 2024 first and second round picks with the PME Warrior Smithfield Shiny Shuckles. The 2022 first became the 103 in Drake London. The 2023 first, I don't remember, it was traded away, but I think it was like Jonathan Mingo. The 2024 first became the 101 in Marvin Harrison, or remains to be seen. But that's the big trade. And I think it's a creative one that kind of, you were just talking about it. If you're trading away Justin Jefferson, go get 3 firsts and 3 seconds. Or if you're trading away Jamar Chase, go get 3 firsts and 3 seconds. If you're truly trying to tear down. And that was kind of the moment where I decided I'm going into this reload process. I'm taking it seriously. I'm not going to peter around in the middle. I'm trading away the best piece in the league for the best package I can get. So, you know, same thing we always do. David, you're taking over the Wyverns roster. First day, are there any moves you're looking to make? What are you trying to do? How are you feeling about the squad?
So I will say, I think I told you going into last year, I didn't think your team was going to do very well, and they didn't at the beginning, but they definitely came on strong at the end. And so,
I remember that. I have the receipts.
yeah, I'm not hiding them. And so I think that the question still remains, like, is that going to continue? And so I think getting rid of Rashad White was a big move. I wonder, like, Travis Etienne looks like he's going to be formidably the starter and like dominate again this year. So like I think projecting that maintains, there's nothing to do in the running back room right now. Your core wide receivers, there's nothing obviously to do there. Trey McBride, that's actually one where I think you could potentially sell. It's an interesting one where
Agreed.
if they grab Marvin Harrison or some of the things, or if you, especially if you're the one that gets Marvin Harrison, he is a Cardinal. Do you want 2 Cardinals starting in your lineup? And is Trey McBride the one that, like, Trey McBride right now, for people that do their homework, probably is pretty highly valued, and you probably could get a decent. It's kind of that peak trough thing. Like, he either has to be top 3 tight end for the next 4 seasons, or you can get the value of that. And so, depending on the person's situation. Well, hey, that maybe you go trade with Matt again and call him up and say, hey, buddy, let's make a trade. But I think so. I think that's kind of one of the question marks, because outside of that, I mean, Kincaid still, and you also have Kincaid as another option too. That if you whiff, like, McBride's value probably is pretty high, especially if he starts off strong. Like, so that's a piece where if you wanted to continue this, not rebuild, but like continue adding pieces of value, that's one that I would probably do, especially knowing Kincaid's right there. And maybe it's the opposite. Kincaid comes out and he's wide receiver 1 because they have no, or tight end 1 because there's no wide receivers in Buffalo, and Josh Allen just throwing the ball at Kincaid 25 times. Like, then sick. That's another option there too, to then piece him out and keep McBride. The question actually kind of comes further when you go further down. I think Drake London, we're all projecting, going to be a top 18 wide receiver, maybe better. But yeah, fingers crossed. And so
I've been doing this for 2 years.
he's another one where, like, are you waiting to see? Are you selling? If someone's willing to pay wide receiver 12 value for Drake London right now, I'd probably take that, depending on if you have the other pieces to put in there and start. Like, you still have Devon A-Chain, you still have potentially Treylon Burks, but you still have Kincaid that could even be a flex play at the bottom. The other piece is Calvin Ridley. Like, I'm not very confident in Calvin Ridley as in a starting lineup. Like, he's if I'm going to win, I'm probably not having Calvin Ridley in my lineup. And now you can replace that with A-Chain. So like to me, that probably is actually going to be a starter, is A-Chain over Ridley, even in the PPR. But that's the other challenge here too, is like, you don't have a ton of depth. You have depth in places that is good, but it's not depth that's like, I don't want to start the guy kind of thing in certain situations. And so that's the pieces here where, like, you do have some of these other people that are young or that have this like really great position. And that's maybe the thing too, like, where are people valuing ETN? Could you go, not to get the McCaffrey trade, but could you get 2 firsts and something for a ETN, and then your HN and Gibbs are your starting running backs, and maybe you can draft another running back in this class, or Charbonnet's your backup, and hopefully Walker sucks. I don't know. Like,
right.
I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic.
That's a good point too.
Or shit, honestly, go get that Steeler trade I talked about. Go get the 2 Steelers players, have them just on your roster. Now you got plenty of running back flex, and it's 3 different teams. You're always going to have starters, and then you can maybe even get an extra piece of it too.
Yo, Brent, hit me up.
Maybe go get that 111 with those 2 for like one of these studs. I don't know. Like, it's an interesting thing, and I think that you have some pieces here too. Like, to me, your roster last year was, if it hits, you had the chance to be champion, and it hit, and you were champion.
Yeah.
To me, this year, I think you got rid of 2 of the pieces I was most concerned about. If it was Nico and Rashad White starting, you bolstered up your top end, and that's like, you can't beat right now in many cases Jackson, Lamb, Chase, Gibbs. Like, that's kind of unbeatable. And the other pieces, though, I think there is those questions of like, are they going to maintain? And not that they're going to get worse, but like, are they going to maintain and not even projecting better, but are they going to be within 20, like maybe 10, 15% less than what they were last season? If they are, your team studs all around. If they aren't, should you have sold one of them to mitigate some of that risk? And hopefully that's the one that doesn't hit. But like, again, capitalize on that max value. If you haven't seen it proven out yet consistently, someone's willing to pay that really high cost, and now you can go maybe trade a couple picks for other things. Because I think like the thing that I'm not looking at your roster right now, I got the top of my head, like Marvin Harrison, let's put him in. So that's replacing Ridley. So maybe you don't need to make that trade. The 109, it kind of depends on what you're going to go for there. probably another wide receiver is my guess. If it is another wide receiver, they're probably not going to be elite right out the gate, but that's fine too. Like, have that optionality there too, where you have another wide receiver, but now you still have, again, this roster almost to Brent's conversation where you can't start depth. I'd rather have some more sure-ish things. You know, do you get the backup to Gibbs? Do you get the backup to ETN if that's going to be your actual starter?
Oh, I should.
Do you try to go get Achan's not Jeff Wilson?
I mean, Tank Bigsby,
the other fucking guy. Yeah, I'll send you Tank. But like for any of those pieces, I think at the running back piece, I love if you're actually going to go compete, if you're on a team that has a good running back room, have the backup. And that's the one thing I think you're missing here. Like, you don't need more running backs. And is that the optionality? Like, do you let Charbonnet go, or do you keep him as that variability, or do you let ETN go and go get the other old pieces for the Dolphins and for the Seahawks and just have them as kind of like, all right, they're there in case something does happen, but I have my three teams, my three starters, and two of their backups that, like, I'm safe at least at running back kind of conversation. So yeah, I think the whole thing is like you're betting on maintain. I think most people will, but I think there is a couple question marks, especially with some team changes and some draft things that are going to happen, that I wonder how that plays out to the future.
Yeah, no, I think you touched on some things I hadn't thought of, which is specifically, so I've mentioned it like three or four times this episode, is that I hate trading from a position of need. So I like trying to build out my depth as much as possible. And I kept saying, I'm now set at receiver. I'm now set at tight end. Never thinking for a second that if Marvin Harrison comes to Arizona, he's cannibalizing Trey McBride, or vice versa. Trey McBride's cannibalizing Marvin Harrison, which means one of them is probably not as sure a thing as I thought of. And Ridley, I like having him as a flex play because I think he's going to get on the field.
I don't know. I don't hate him as a flex. I was viewing him as a starter and not putting Harrison in there. So I take back that comment a little bit. He's to me, he's not a great. He's a good
he was
bench
top
player.
24 last year. So I'm like really happy with, like, if he's even in my starting lineup, I think he deserves to be a starter in our league on someone's roster. Maybe not on a championship roster, but like if you think you can get him to make playoff run, he's a good type of player to have as your flex too. You definitely don't want him in your wide receiver 1 or 2 slot.
You should have just put him with the 312 for Michael Pittman, because apparently that's all I had to pay for Michael Pittman.
I know. Yeah. No. But so I guess like the only so I think you kind of nailed everything I'm thinking of. Like, I said it with Brent's team, I don't like having so much equity tied up in running back, especially in my case where I have only 4 running backs, but a ton of team equity tied up into basically 3 players. So one of them goes down, my running back room takes a 30% drop. If ETN gets hurt, my running back room is shot. If HN gets hurt, so it's like, how do I fill out my running back depth without? I can't tier up anymore. I don't have the pieces to tier up anymore. So I almost feel like, kind of like you said, entertaining. Can I tier down from ETN and HN? And I've kind of floated some HN trades out there and haven't really gotten the kind of bites I want. I really liked Charbonnet as a prospect. I'm super disappointed he's stuck behind Ken Walker, and I'm not hoping for an injury, but I know that in the event of an injury, he's got to be a top 5 handcuff.
Who has Walker?
The Turtles.
Go get him.
I tried. They value Walker too high for me.
Yeah, but go give him A-Chain for Walker and picks.
Yeah, they like Walker more than A-Chain, so it's already
okay. Well, that's already just a dumb conversation.
Yeah. Trust me, I know. I floated the idea of if I gave up 109 and A-Chain for Walker and 105. And they were like, we're not going to have this conversation. So I was like, okay, I guess never mind. Like, I thought it was a fairly decent.
The 109 in A-Chain for
the 105 in Walker. So they'd be moved back 4 spots.
Stupid of them. That is just crazy.
And I was like, it's not a dead deal. I just was like, would this be a construct of a trade you'd be considering? And they were like, absolutely not. So I was like, okay, I won't even. Sorry for even bringing it up. My bad.
Well, yeah, I do think that if you could get some, because I think that the nice thing is for all of them except for ETN, they're stuck behind older guys too. So like, they should, in theory, be cheaper. That it's like you're adding that, hey, maybe they're still around. If Gibbs does go down, you have Montgomery. If Montgomery goes down, you already were planning to start Gibbs probably, and that's just kind of biding that time. That like you're not trying to go chase them when Nick Chubb breaks his knee.
Right. That's my biggest fear, is that I have to go give up. Like I don't want to have to break up.
Or the Saquon thing, like me. Like if I had Saquon's backup at the time, I solve at least the rush to go try to make this big grandiose trade and don't lose Mahomes, don't lose Saquon at the time, whatever. So
Yeah, so kind of going back to like kind of my philosophy was I hate trading for need because I feel like you get bent over by people when they're like, "Oh, it looks like you need a running back. Like, give me how about?" So like I've been trying my best to fill out a backup at every position. It's totally opposite of what Brent tries to do, which he's like, "I don't give a fuck about depth," and I'm sitting here like I traded up specifically from the 112 to the 109 because I don't have full confidence in having to start Jared Goff as my QB1 if Lamar Jackson goes down. Or inversely, I don't want to have to rely if Jahmyr Gibbs tears his ACL in preseason. I don't want my RB2 on bye weeks to be Zach Charbonnet. So like my idea at 109 is the best available QB or running back. Like I don't know who it's going to be. If it's Caleb Williams, if it's Jaden Daniels, if it's Trey Benson, if it's I need somebody who's ready to start plug in right away. So maybe on the clock I'll trade the 109 for, you know, I can't think of running a Josh Jacobs type or whatever, but it's probably not enough. But some kind of you're muted, but
yeah, but it's not even just that. It's also like just like to the whole like backup thing, or not just backups, but to have depth. You're not even just worried about injuries. You're still gonna have to deal with all the fucking buys. In some weeks,
yeah,
some years, you're gonna get double buys just of how the buys fall. And it's like you can just give up that 1 week, fine, and maybe that's Brent's philosophy. All right, well, I just know a couple weeks I'm going to have bad bye weeks, so I kind of give up 3 losses there, and then I'm projecting to have such a good team the rest of the time that I don't have to worry about it. I don't know, and maybe that's a good theory that I should start employing more. But I'm in the same camp. Like I haven't adjusted my roster, but like on my bench right now is Rashee Rice, Mike Williams, and Austin Eckler, and like maybe Austin Eckler still kind of washed and sucks, but like those are okay pieces to be looking at from 2 years.
I would love
ago.
to have Eckler on my bench.
That's a sick little bench piece. So, but again, like that's the option for me right now to say, all right, well, do I just go trade those guys with some of my starters to go get these top 10, top 15 guys? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't been in that camp. I mean, I haven't sometimes. I like to have top tier guys, and I have, but they're all getting older. And so I'm in that challenging position where it's like, do I do what you, Matt, and Brent have done, but in different ways? Do I try to do the same thing? And so it's, but I think the only person that actually has any depth is you. But again, your depth is still in a challenging position where it's like some things are looking great, some things are not. And it also is going to depend on how they kind of fall through. Like your depth on Ridley is Burks. And like they're also on the same team. And then
JSN.
So you're only, yeah, so I'm saying then your only option for flex in that week is going to be JSN and Pop Douglas, which like
Pop Douglas.
Yeah, whatever you
well, you know what's funny too, which you mentioned was, you know, you said that going into last season, I wasn't regarded as a contender, not a top contender. And I remember telling you, I think it was after, let me pull up the trade. I made the trade for Amari Cooper last year. I traded away a second and 2/3 for Amari Cooper and a third. And I was like, you know, he was like, oh, nice trade. I wish somebody like the Beavers had done that. Somebody who had a real chance to win or something like that. And I was like, Dave, I don't think you realize like I'm sneakily probably one of the dark horses to win this year. But I remember candidly talking to Bowman saying, I'm really 1 year away. Like my real window to contend will be 2024. And then just everything came together, specifically Nico and White smashing, made me from a strong, youthful team to I'm ready to compete right now. And now my window is open, which is why I kind of pushed in some chips. I was fully happy with I'm going to build this team through the draft because I love scouting players. I love making the draft picks. That's my favorite part of Dynasty is the rookie draft. So I will always overvalue the rookie picks above and beyond anything else. And I don't care what anybody says to me. I've rejected the chase for 101 and I would still reject it today. I want to make the pick. I think it's so much fun to do. Maybe on the clock, I'll change my mind, but it's like, so like I was looking forward to saying, I don't care how long it takes. I want to build a dynasty. I'm not trying to build a 1 year champ. I want to see if I can build a sustained dynasty. And I think I'm losing sight of the fact that you have built a dynasty, but just with different players every year, or like every other year, you kind of mix up the core. And it's like, that's so funny because you've still built a dynasty, just like what I'm trying to do, but I'm trying to do it a different way. I'm trying to say, I drafted Trey McBride. I drafted Drake London. I acquired CeeDee Lamb and ETN on the cheap. I got Jamar Chase. I drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, drafted A-Chain, drafted Burks, drafted JSN, drafted Kincaid. I'm like, I'm looking forward to building this team the quote unquote right way in my head. It doesn't have to be done that way, but I'm trying to build I want to contend for 2 or 3 years in a row, not let me go buy Devontae right now, Keenan Allen right now, and go, even though they're probably going to give me a better chance to win than a guy like Drake London. I could probably go send London for Tyreek Hill right now, but I don't want to do that. Like I want to build
actually probably good.
Right.
But yeah, that, I mean, and honestly, I think I've kind of now made, my, my goal is I don't want to miss the playoffs. I don't think I have yet. Did I miss 1 year?
You're the only team left in the league that has never missed
Yeah,
playoffs.
so I think I'm kind of in this camp now. So I'd say that's kind of a dynasty. Like that's what you want
It
to be
is.
with one
And
championship and couple times I've made it. Have I made it? I made it 2 times or 1 time.
You've made 2 championship.
And
No,
last
you've
one.
only made 1 championship. You made it 2-1 championship, but you've been in the playoffs every year.
Yeah.
The only other teams that have even made it 4 times are myself and the Wyverns, the Kongs, and the Sasquatch have made it 4 out of 5 years. Everybody else in the league's on notice.
I think that's not going to be my goal. So I'm just going to try to keep building and like jerry rigging this team together as a manager. Just like I'm
saying it's rigged?
the playoffs. Yeah, jerry rigging it. you know jerry rig?
Yeah. No, and I think we've kind of touched on everything with the Wyverns. I'm super excited for my team. I love it. I think, I built it. I put a lot of time on trade talks and relationship building and scouting and evaluating. And sometimes it works with Nico, and sometimes it doesn't work with Traylon Burks. And it's okay. I'm always grinding. I'm always trying to get 1% better. And now I guess the next segment would be if we've had any trades to go over, but womp womp. We're going on 2 weeks now without a trade in our league. It's a little disappointing. But we have the NFL draft next week. We kind of already talked about it. I don't know what our theme is for our next week's episode is going to be. Maybe Dave and I will probably talk off cam and figure it out. But rookie draft will probably be a couple weeks following that. Maybe Dave and I will give our rookie draft rankings. It's kind of hard since it kind of is anti-competitive if you guys know our rankings going to the draft. But I think it'd be a fun exercise to go through as like maybe, I don't know. We'll talk about it after. But
I think what would be good is like, is if we evaluated more of like what we'd want to see people go on to certain teams, and we'll talk about it later. But like, I think that would be a fun one. And then maybe after we know what team they're on, kind of like evaluate how we think that it affected, or where we actually get excited about guys and who we're most excited about coming into the NFL, without kind of actually saying who we like necessarily or what order.
Mm-hmm. No, it's great. I have nothing else. So if you got nothing else, I think it's been a good episode, guys. If you like the roster review series, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, leave us an OTQ in the comments. Maybe we can get to it next episode. We do this for you. We love you all. We're out here grinding every week. Dave, thanks for your time. Thanks for your face. Love you, bro.
Next time.
Bye.
Bye.